On September 30th, 1999, the American Civil Liberty Union of Michigan filed a federal lawsuit to stop America's first known statewide drug testing requirement for welfare recipients. In the Martwinsky v. Howard case, Carrie Moss from ACLU.org, who is the executive director and an attorney in the case, argued that such drug testing violated the Fourth Amendment, which guarantees that no individual in this country can be subjected to a search by the government unless there is a reasonable suspicion that they have committed some crime. Moss explains that being poor is not a crime, and judging the majority of the unemployed as lazy and unwilling to work, and being affiliated with illegal drug use was obscene. Whether you are currently part of the working force or unemployment at some point for a job, you may be required to take a drug test prior to being hired. You can, however, deny said drug test, but be aware that it will affect your eligibility for the job for liability reasons upon the employer. After researching this topic and having to take drug tests myself for jobs, I now understand the legal measures of drug testing in and out of the workplace. Surprisingly, while dissecting these facts in legal matters, I can say I formally disagree with the conversational topic that welfare recipients should have to undergo a drug test prior to becoming eligible for the assistance. Continuing with the example in the Martwinsky v. Howard case, single mother Tanya Martwinsky was on welfare assistance. At the time, adults with no children were not eligible for any assistance in Michigan. Martwinsky's attorney argued that drug testing a single mother trying to provide for her family was unfair and unreasonable under the Fourth Amendment rights. Moss states, forcing parents to choose between providing for their children and giving up their right to privacy rights is a giant step backwards for public policy in Michigan. The judge blocked the case because he said it was dangerous authority to take under the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment directly states that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, in particular describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. In this particular case, the court ruled in limited circumstances where the privacy interests implicated by the search are minimal and where the important government interests furthered by the intrusion would be placed in jeopardy by a requirement of individualized suspicion, a search may be reasonable despite the absence of such suspicion. Although this verdict sounds confusing, basically the judge awarded the trial in favor of the plaintiff Martwinsky because there was no substantial evidence that she was inappropriately using drugs just because she was poor. The judge also declared that accusing an innocent woman trying to provide for her family is acting in any criminal behavior with no known suspicion was unconstitutional. Debate.org says welfare was put into effect to help those get back on their feet, not to live off for the rest of their life. So understanding that using some tax-paying dollars is set aside to cushion those who temporarily cannot support themselves, the numbers are already substantially without adding the extra cost of drug testing. Drug testing, every individual applicant up for welfare would cost on average $30 per test. With about a third of the nation currently on some form of welfare, it would cost as much as $43,000 a month and $516,000 a year per state. So as a nation, the grand total could exceed $25,800,000 in 1 year. Currently, about $108 billion is distributed throughout the welfare organizations. So adding almost $26 million on top of that would cost the average U.S. taxpayer an extra $240 a year. This graph shows the dollar amount spent on welfare in the past few years without adding the extra cost on drug testing. It is estimated to exceed $110 billion by the end of this year. The next slide shows in 2011 how much each state spent on welfare, not paid in. Minnesota spending the most at almost $500 million. Opponents argue that if drug testing goes into effect, drug treatment organizations should be there to help as well. They say the government is all for paying for drug testing but not for rehabilitation or treatment centers for the needy and their families. Although drug testing welfare recipients would cost us more money, drug testing applicants for a job is paid for by the companies themselves for which the candidates are applying for. Propaganda has been going around stating that why shouldn't welfare recipients have to pass a drug test in order to receive the assistance since workers have to earn a paycheck and then pay in tax dollars to support people on welfare. Lisa Gurin explains in her article with the No Low Law for All website that legally there is no law for stating that an employer must drug test an applicant before hiring. Most safety regulation policies and codes, however, require at the employer's expense a drug test to be submitted for all of their employees upon the hiring process for the job safety. Most large or corporation-owned companies require drug tests for consideration in your opportunity as an employee because it helps avoid liability issues for the company itself. If an intoxicated employee harms someone on the job, the employer could legally be responsible. A major issue with reasoning behind drug testing in the workplace is because a lot of jobs require you to use machinery nowadays. If you operate any mechanical machinery under the influence of any illegal or alcoholic substance, it not only puts you and the company in danger, but the law force usually gets involved. When becoming an employee for a new company, you are often presented with discounts and insurance eligibility. An insurance company wants the healthiest patients because they cost them the least. So somebody on drugs who is more likely to have health problems or get injured at work is a bigger risk to the company. Lastly, employers sometimes require a drug test because they want you to maintain a drug-free workplace. Having a drug-free workplace takes their chances to 3 times more likely to save money. This is because workers constantly participating in illegal drug use are 3 times as likely to be late for work and also 3.5 times as likely to be hurt on the job or be involved in a workplace accident. Those on drugs are 5 times more likely to file for workers' compensation, causing the business to lose more money than it would actually save by being drug-free. Now that I've gone over the reasoning as to why the American government has not passed any laws for mandatory drug testing, basically comes down to your constitutional rights. You can decide for yourself which side of the fence you stand on. The major problem with drug testing welfare recipients deals with violating the 4th Amendment. This is an obvious reason as to why each proposal from the current 29 states will eventually fall through the court system unless certain measures dealing with liability or safety issues arise. It is also very costly to the nation, and we are currently in no need for extra areas needing financial funding. Why should I pay an extra $240 a year to drug test welfare applicants when research from the Tampa Tribune in 2011 states that 96% of applicants tested in Florida were actually drug-free? The push for drug testing in the welfare community is not only unnecessary, but also wasteful of time and money.